there's always a worry for the secretary, as Stuart knows full well, about arranging the following year and the year after national championship somewhere. And someone mentioned to me about Poole Harbour, and round between Poole Harbour and Swanage is Studland Bay, which is a beauty spot. And they said that it would be possible to, if you could organise the rescue boat and the committee boat and all that, it would be possible to hold the championships actually in Studland Bay. And there was a village hall behind which one could hire for the prize giving and the social events. But first I had to write to the Kingston Lacey and Corfe Castle estates for permission. The Studland Bay is a private beach with entry. I don't think they charge, but they're very particular who they let on the beach, and the beach is kept immaculate. You won't find any cigarette ends on the beach and rubbish. You know, they go along and clean it beautifully, and it's a nice wide stretch of sand shelving gently into the sea, so it was quite possible to launch the entire fleet all at once. So then came the problem of the committee boat, so I was able to use a rescue boat that I had over the lake at the sailing school, and Ken Hunt from CAM, he was president, and he organised a few things as well. So we got we managed to borrow an inflatable with an outboard motor and a few other things, and we had to take our own marks down as well. So it all went quite well really, except as Metcalfe has pointed out on a few occasions, I think in their first championships race we put a kind of triangular Olympic course in, which of course is always port-handed, and during the race I forget what class of yacht it was, they came out, and we'd more or less pinched one of their marks, except that they were rounding it to starboard and we were going round it to port, so there were a few remarks shouted across the water. But a very successful week, and during the time there was one or two really very windy days, and Ken Hunt, who sailed his Moth 245, I think it is, Aeolus, it was built at an aircraft factory of sheet aluminium using aircraft rivets. That's quite a technique. The aircraft rivets are completely different from the ordinary type of pop rivets, you know. He capsized, and he was gradually being driven out to sea, and he was rescued very ignominiously by a mirror dinghy with an outboard motor on the back. So we were able to hire about a dozen beach huts for changing and all that, so it worked out very well.
Yeah.
And in the finish we had the prize giving, I believe, actually on the beach, which is really a first, but it was quite an achievement. I was quite proud of that really, and we had pretty good entry as well. We had a sort of maxim in those days that we used to try where possible to have events in sea conditions, either estuary or the open sea, and then alternate it with an inland venue, which worked quite well at the time. So that was won by Peter Firstbrook from Littleton Sailing Club, sailing number 407 Aquavit. I don't know who built the boat, but it was the first Moth that I'd seen, and I haven't really seen anything like it since, where the centre ball was long and quite thin, but when he was close hauled, the centre ball was actually angled forward about 15 degrees, which is most unusual with a boat. Whilst it didn't foot particularly fast to windward, it pointed fearfully high. But Peter was quite an athletic lad, and he was quite good, so he won that one. And then, of course, the following year we went back to, I believe it was Wroxham, wasn't it? After that. Yeah, we went back to Wroxham and Peter won again. I don't remember too much about that, but I think that I may have won one of the trophies there. But anyway, Wroxham Broad always had the problem with trees growing all round, and some few years after we were there, the club got permission to actually cut down 2,000 trees because of the problem, but when we revisited it later, they were all back up again. I'll never forget that. It was a lovely place to sail, and the club was very nice. They've been good to us over the years. So again then Peter won that in 69 and also in 70, but he changed his boat then. He'd got a boat called the Hobbit, and I can't quite remember who built that, but he sailed it very well and also won the championships, which was then at Harwich. And we'd had open meetings at Harwich as well, and there's this Harwich Town Sailing Club, not the Royal Harwich. The Royal Harwich is slightly up the estuary, but the Town Sailing Club really is a little bit like the Southern situation. It's on the beach, and there's a small sort of few villagey type of dwellings behind, including a church. And I think Morris got to know the vicar or the rector, whatever you call him, of this church, and they allowed us to actually sleep in a hall belonging to the church. And so that went down very, very well. And the one outstanding thing I remember about it is that it was a particularly windy event. And on our first night, I think it was, we were all lying on the floor sleeping in whatever, sleeping bags and all the rest of it. Somebody had the radio on, and he must have had Radio London on, because over the air came a shout, "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday, this is Radio London, we're on fire, someone's thrown a bomb on board."
Oh.
And of course we all looked round and panic and all the rest of it, but then after a while, after we phoned round, it was obvious that the Coast Guards were fully aware. The boat wasn't badly damaged, I understood it later, but it was quite amusing really.
Yeah.
On one of the nights, or one of the late evenings, it started to blow half a gale, and our boats were all on the beach. They were past a high water mark, but nevertheless we had to devise means of keeping them down against the gale. So a lot of us filled up things like kit bags or sail bags, filled them with sand, and put these bags in the boat to stop them being blown out to sea. And then I remember David Edwards was sailing there in number 6, which was Bluebird, of course, and he had made a brief comeback. And he was a bit foolish really, because the next day when the racing was completely abandoned, he insisted on going out, and it really was, the conditions were awful, and they had to radio, and they brought a pilot boat out to rescue him in the finish.
Yeah.
So that was nasty, but nevertheless Peter sailed very, very well and won that championship as well. And his father was quite a good committee member, and he helped the association worker, George Firstbrook his name was, and something tragic happened after that. He sort of disappeared from sailing point of view. Apparently he'd finished college and gone into oceanography, and he unfortunately developed glandular fever, and he was never ever the same afterwards for anything, as I understood it. So that was Harwich Town Sailing Club. You'll remember it because along the beach there's one of the Martello Towers, which is a distinct landmark when you're approaching Harwich. Oh, the other thing that happened in that event is that one day when it wasn't too windy, I had the misfortune to drive round the final mark with a broad reach to cross the finishing line, and then also Broadreach to get back to the beach. And as I drove round the final mark, the clevis pin came out the forestay. So I was swinging in the breeze, and I was able to sit right back and playing pretty well all the way back over the finishing line, up the beach, jumped out the boat and caught the mast as it fell down. Now that was Harrow's, that was a laugh. And of course Morris has related the tale about when we were asleep on the hall, this church hall, they had an electric clock there, and it must have been very, very old because its tick was extremely loud. Wouldn't bother me much nowadays with my hearing as it is, but this thing, you know, you're trying to go, it's going tick tock, tick tock, tick tock in the finish. I got a chair, stood the chair on the table and balanced and lifted the clock off and buried it under a pillow. But the next day, before we were packed up and went home, I tried to put the clock back, but I dropped it on the way up and it fell into about 8 pieces. And anyway, undeterred, somebody went and got a tube of araldite or some such thing, and we glued it all together and carefully managed to get it stuck up there again. But, it's one of Morris Metcalfe's favourite tales.